How can God love me?
What is my purpose?
What happens after death?
Why do bad things keep happening to me?
Who is God?
Welcome to this week's askGHCC, where we're going to look at the question, why does God allow innocent children to get cancer? And this question is really difficult, actually, and I'm going to do my best to answer it in two parts. So in this video, we're going to look at part one, and I'm going to try to answer this question in the philosophical and theoretical nature. And then in the second video, I'm going to answer it in a theological and more pastoral kind of manner. And so for this time, we're going to look at this question, why does God allow innocent children to get cancer, in more of a philosophical and theoretical way. And so what I want to do is I want to look at that question, and I want to start at the end of the question, which is the cancer aspect, and then work backwards and go to the innocent children, and then lastly, why God allows. So the question is, why does God allow innocent children to get cancer? So I want to start with the cancer aspect. Cancer is not original to God's design for creation. It's not the way life is supposed to be. Cancer came into creation at the fall. Because of Adam's sin, cancer itself and all the diseases that we experience in life were introduced into the universe. And so they're not original. They're a violation. And so when we ask this question, why does God allow innocent children to get cancer? We have to realize that asking this question, we're really exposing this feeling we have of being violated. So the second part of the question is the innocent children. And I know this is going to sound cold, but there really isn't such thing as an innocent child. And what I mean by that is every child that is born into the world, into the universe, is born into a broken universe, which is affected by the fall, what Adam and Eve did in Genesis chapter 3. Is they introduced sin and evil into the world. And so every molecule in this universe is affected by the fall. And so every child that we bring into the world is going to be entering into a world that is fallen and broken and distorted, full of disease and full of suffering and full of pain. And not only that, but every child we bring into the universe is a child who is born with a sinful nature. The scriptures are real clear about the fact that every human being is affected by sin. And we inherited that sinful nature from Adam, again, from Genesis chapter 3. And so when you pair these two things together, what you have is you have a child who is born with a sinful nature inherited from Adam, entering into a world which is fallen and broken. And so really, there is no innocent children. Both the children who are born into the world and the world itself is broken, and it is marred, and it is distorted because of sin and because of the fall. So having looked at the first two parts of that question, we want to finish looking at the third part of the question and then really look at the entire question itself. So remember, the entire question was, why does God allow innocent children to get cancer? And we've already talked about what cancer is and about the reality that there isn't innocent children. And so now we want to look at the why aspect. And to be quite honest, it's really difficult to ever come to a firm answer of why God does anything, because God is the creator and we're the creation. And so we don't get a lot of answers, unfortunately. But a couple things that we can point to is the whole reason why this question is asked most often is because people are mad or people are angry. People are experiencing pain because of the suffering they're experiencing. So if we do encounter a child who does have cancer, we feel terrible about it. And we know that the feeling we have of just that pain at seeing a child with cancer, it's a validation of the fact that cancer is not the way it's supposed to be. And there is a better world out there, and this world is not the better world that we know really does exist. So as people ask that question of why God is doing anything, they're really expressing the pain they have about observing this particular suffering and the pain that they have about it. And so what I tend to want to do with people who are expressing their pain and asking this question is to make sure that they're not blaming God, but that they can freely express their pain towards God. I think God allows us at times to be mad at him because we don't understand what's going on. And that really is a lot of the motivation behind that question of why, God, are you doing this? I'm mad at you, I'm frustrated. But the encouraging thing to me is this, is if God is big enough and he's transcendent enough and he's great enough to be mad at for allowing this kind of evil, then in my mind, God is also big enough and great enough and transcendent enough to also have a good reason behind why he's allowing it in the first place. And so that really is a good way for me personally to be able to grasp with the pain I'm feeling and with what seems to be a meaningless suffering. It really is this fact that God is big and God is great, and he does have some reason behind it, and he can have a reason behind it. And the other thing is, as people express their pain about what they're experiencing in this suffering, like seeing a child with cancer, a lot of times we can be mad at God, but it goes beyond that. We can begin to hate God, and we even question his goodness. We even question him, his existence. And to that end, what I like to do with people is just remind them that suffering and the pain that accompanies suffering is not necessarily an indication that God is not good or that God doesn't exist. And matter of fact, C.S. Lewis oftentimes uses suffering and pain to prove that God does in fact exist. And for example, he does this. As we look around the world and we see the suffering and we see the pain that's going on, and we conclude that this world is unjust, he asks the question of where in the world do we get this concept of the world being unjust in the first place? And the only way for us to have in our minds a conception of this world being unjust is if we have a notion in our minds of what a just world is really like. And so this world is unjust, but the fact that we call it unjust tells us that we are aware of a world which is in fact just. And that just world is a better world. And for us as Christians, we know that better world to be the world before the fall in Genesis 1 and 2, and the world that will come when Jesus returns in the new heavens and new earth. And so as people get angry and they're frustrated with God, is he good or not? Or does God even exist because I see all this suffering and all this pain? We can say, yeah, God does exist. And the fact that we conclude that this world is unjust is an indication that we intuitively know that there is such thing as a just world, and it's not here, it's somewhere else. It's a better world. And for us as Christians, we know that to be heaven. And so as I look at this question, why does God allow innocent children to get cancer? I think that would be my answer. Once we set the context of understanding what cancer is, a violation of God's original plan for creation. And then the second part is that there is no such thing as innocent children. All children are born with a sinful nature, and they enter into a world that isn't innocent. It's fallen, it's broken, it's distorted. And when we want to know why, God, are you doing anything? God is God and we're not. And we don't have a good reason for why he does anything. But we can take great comfort in the fact that God is great, and he does have a reason behind allowing us to experience the suffering we do. And we can be mad at God and express our frustration, but it doesn't mean that God doesn't exist. The fact that we know that what we experience is unjust is evidence to us that we know intuitively of a just world in which we call heaven. So that's part one of this askGHCC, asking this question of why God allows this suffering in a more theoretical and philosophical way. And then part two, we're going to look more at a theological and pastoral way to answer the question and to really encourage people and to meet them and how to actually minister to them in their suffering. And so we'll do that the next time.